Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Amy McCoy. I'm a member of the ongoing operations team, and thank you for joining this installment of our Lattes and Learning series. So we have a special guest who's going to be presenting today, Brad Powell, who is the founder and CEO of Redboard. Brad's a credit union industry veteran who founded Redboard, a software as a service platform to help credit unions save time in their audit and examination process. Redboard is part of Axiaware, a technology company that helps credit unions, banks, and insurers deliver software experiences that their customers love. A few housekeeping items as we get ready to get going. If you have any questions as Brad's going through the presentation, please feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat. And we'll go ahead and make sure that if they're pressing, Brad gets to them as he's going through the presentation. Also, please feel free to hang on till the end as well, since we'll have plenty of time for open Q&A at the end of the presentation. In addition, if you're looking for any of the worksheets that Brad's going to reference or that he emailed out in advance, but you may or may not have seen, a link to those is also in the chat now. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brad and grab your coffee and enjoy this installment.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Amy. So good afternoon, audit stars. For those of you on the West Coast, good morning, I guess still. So again, my name is Brad Powell. I'm the founder of Redboard, and basically I help credit unions run their audit programs efficiently. So first thing I want to do just to get started with is this is going to be an interactive session. So I want to do a quick tech check. And what I mean by that is we're going to be sharing information via the chat window. So I would just like everyone to find the chat window on their GoToWebinar panel. And just so I can make sure that everything's working, if you could just enter your name and the credit union you're calling in from, and I'll welcome you each as I see it come across. So if you could just enter your name and where you're from, I would much appreciate it.
Brad, we've got a couple here that came in through the questions. We've got Chris from Together Credit Union and Athena from Pacific Crest Federal Credit Union.
Great.
And Amber from Truliant.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to be talking about today are a bunch of different challenges. So let's talk about the first one. The first one is findings management. So, managing your findings and observations can be a real challenge. If you just have one or two audits, probably not really a problem. But as you add more audits, add more and more findings, they start to stack up over time, and the time frame for those findings can just be all over the board. So it can easily drift out of control. Deadlines are critical, and holding your management to the deadlines is even more critical. Second challenge, spreadsheets. So I know that most of you probably manage your audit process on a spreadsheet, and we all know that it's a pain. It's tedious, it's manual, it's error prone, and most importantly, it just burns a ton of time. And that's time that you could be spending digging deeper on a given audit, or addressing emerging risks, or ensuring better coverage across your program. And then the other challenge we're going to talk about is that we're just getting less done. I think we've all experienced the toll that the pandemic has wreaked on our personal and professional lives. I run a mastermind group with credit union audit professionals, and this is the #1 recurring theme that comes up in our calls. Month after month, I hear words like fatigue and burnout and exhausted. And just the reality is that we're all working harder, we're burning more cycles, and we're getting less done. And it's not just for us, it's across the organization. One person I was talking to even put a number on it. They were thinking they're spending 30 to 50% more time on their audit activities. It's just exhausting. So here's my promise to you. In today's webinar, I'm going to teach you something called the Findings Accountability Framework. In that, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the structure you need to manage your findings. We're going to talk about how to work best with your business units. And we're going to talk about the key bases that you need to cover from a communication perspective. And then how all that works together to deliver consistent accountability on your findings and your observations. And then at the end, for those that are interested in learning more about how our product can help, we're going to talk about how to get there faster, how to free yourself from the pains of spreadsheets, how to cut your admin time in half, and just how to get more done in this crazy work environment that we're all experiencing today. So first, we're going to talk about the accountability framework. And then for those that are interested, we'll talk about how to make your process more efficient, save time, and get more done. So if that sounds like a plan, this is your first time to talk in the chat, just let me know. Please type yes in the chat so I know that I'm on the right track. So I'm gonna wait, get a couple of answers here. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right, covering the right thing. All right, great. I see some yeses coming across. Thank you very much. All right, so let's get started. The first thing I want to start with is just tell you the story about how this came about, so you know a little bit where this came from. So for the last 25 years, me and my team have been serving financial services companies. So primarily credit unions, life insurance companies, health insurance companies, and the like. You know, in a nutshell, what we do is apply technology and automation to make everyday processes more efficient. And as sort of a side note, I have some crazy genetics. My dad was an internal auditor for an oil company, and my mom has a PhD in accounting. I mean, you can think about that, a PhD in accounting, it's just nuts, right? So I got this stuff in my blood, basically. But the client that my team has been working with most over the years is a large credit union. We've automated a variety of processes for them, including auto loans, mortgages, card approvals. And we've also done a bunch of compliance-related activities like BSA monitoring and audit automation and workflows. And about 5 years ago, we just decided to do something different. Instead of helping the biggest credit union with their specific needs, we wanted to help the entire industry with those same things. So we want to help a much larger segment. So the first thing that I did was I set up a meeting with one of my customers. It was a guy named Frank Myers. He, at the time, was an SVP at Navy Federal, and he had worked all over the credit union for many years. He was also a former NCUA examiner. And what Frank helped me see was that most credit unions ran their audits on a spreadsheet, and it was really inefficient. And I walked out of there knowing what we needed to do. So I interviewed as many people as I could talk to, you know, credit union CEOs, audit heads, attorneys, and other industry experts. We spent months talking to people, trying to figure out exactly how we can help. And what we came up with was this plan to move the needle in a big way. And it's what we now call the findings accountability framework. And that's what I'm going to talk with you about today. So it's been researched, it's been tested in the trenches, and it works. So there are 3 parts to the framework. And this is where, if you have your worksheets, if you can turn to page 3 on the worksheets, there'll be a place for you to take notes there. The framework is structured around something I call the audit accountability triangle. There's 3 parts to this. The base of the triangle is structure. This is all about how you organize your information and what you do with it. It's, you know, what you track and how you track it needs to be consistent, and how it flows through your audit process also needs to be consistent. When I say structure, that's what I mean. Second part are business units. Some people also will call this business areas or management or staff, or for whatever you call it. I'm going to use the word business units. So I mean, if you want your findings and observations to be cleared in a timely manner, your business units need to be a critical part of the equation. They can't be an afterthought. They need to have a seat at the table. And we're going to talk about exactly how you can do that. And then the third side of the triangle is communication. For all this to work, communication needs to flow. So some of this is between the audit team and the business units. Some of it is communication up, like to upper management and the board. And we're going to dive into what all of that exactly means. So if you're looking to improve your findings management process and do things like, decrease the aging on your outstanding issues, increase your coverage, and what a lot of people tell me the big one is increase the value perceived by your management and your board, then these are the types of things you need to be paying attention to. So before we dive in, I'd like to hear in the chat. This is an opportunity for you to give me feedback in the chat of the 3 sides of the triangle. So structure, business units, and communication. Which are you most excited to hear about? So tell me in the chat. Let me know right now. I'd love to hear before we get started. So I think communication was one. Communication seems to be a big one. All right, so sounds great. And hopefully we're going to be able to get to all of this. So we're going to get started first. I'm going to start with the base of the triangle, so structure. So I'm going to share, and if you want to, you can turn to page 4 in your worksheets. That's what we're going to cover right now. So I'm going to start with a concept called structure determines performance. Oops. And I'm going to use this with an example. And just so you know, I would love to say I created this, but I actually pulled this from 2 academic researchers, 2 guys named Bill Adams and Bob Anderson. But imagine this example. So you have a Prius, right? It gets almost 60 miles per gallon in the city. It's more than double the mileage of most cars. You know, the Prius is designed for economy. It will never compete in a NASCAR race, no matter how hard the driver pushes the pedal to the metal. You know, how it is designed and not the driver primarily determines its performance. So I want you to think about this in terms of your audit process. You know, likewise, your audit processes are designed for the performance that you are getting. So structure determines performance. So here's my question to you. With regards to the structure you have for managing your findings and observation, what's the performance that you're getting? So I mentioned on page 4, I have a couple places for you to take notes there. I have a couple of questions. You don't need to put them in the chat or anything. I just want you to write them down for yourself. First question I have for you is, you know, what is frustrating you about your current process? So what about it either, you know, keeps you up at night or just annoys you or bugs you or cause some kind of some problems? And just to help out, I'm going to give you a little bit of a crib sheet. These are things that we hear most frequently from credit unions that we talk to. So you can write your own or take a couple off of the list that I put up there, but just take 10 seconds or so and kind of jot down what are the frustrations that you're having with your audit process now. All right. So second question for you is I'm going to ask you a question of what you think the impact is. And what I mean by that, if you have these frustrations, what's the impact that frustration is either having on you or your staff or your credit union or on others? All right. And just like for this, I'm going to give you a little bit of crib sheet. I'm going to share some of the things that we hear most often. Probably the biggest thing we hear is that it's you know, hindering the growth of our credit union, or you know, my board wants something different, or my regulators want more, or something like that. So take just a couple seconds, jot down, what do you think, what's the impact that frustration is having on you? All right, and then final question on the right side of the worksheet is, you know, imagine for a second that you didn't have these frustrations you mentioned. So imagine you didn't have them. What would it look like, and what would it feel like if you were in that state? So I want you to jot a couple of those down, and likewise, I'm going to give you a little bit of a crib sheet of what we've heard a lot in the past. The biggest thing that we hear most often is, hey, I just want everything cleared on time and as expected. I just don't want any surprises. So take a couple of seconds, write those down. So with that, so far we've kind of talked about what you are or what you're getting and you're not getting from the structure of your findings management process. So now let's shift gears and talk about how to make it better. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change my screen to page 5 of the worksheet. So if you want to turn to that, I'm actually going to talk off the worksheet on this one. Let me flip to this real quick. All right, so what I'm going to describe for you here is a recommended structure. And again, this is the structure that's been tested in many credit unions, and it was the output of all of our research. So the structure has 3 different parts to it. The first part is your workflow stages. So for all of your findings, you should make sure that they fit or are classified into one of 4 stages, either draft, management response, remediation, or closed. All right. Most of those are self-explanatory. Now, in some cases, you may not have a finding being a draft status. So for example, if the finding is coming out of an exam or from an outside auditor, by the time you actually get a hold of it, it may be in final form, or it's not what you would consider draft, so you put it right in a management response. Whereas if you're writing your own finding from an internal audit process, you probably are going to have those in the draft form. So the key is that you want to be able to create these stages so that you can always look at a finding and at a quick glance figure out where it's at. That's the importance of that. Next part of the structure are due dates, okay? And for this, you actually this is one place where I see some people fall down a lot, is that you need to track 2 separate due dates on your findings. The first is your management response process, because your management response process is generally fairly short term. Maybe it's a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a month or whatever it is. It's a relatively short period of time. And that's different than your remediation process, because the remediation process could be, anywhere from 2 days to 2 months or 2 years, depending on the nature of the finding and how long it takes to resolve it. So it's important to track these differently and record these so that you can have a good idea of how you're actually performing on your findings. And then the third part of the structure is what we call data model, which is just in my software world, it's just a fancy term for these are the fields that you need to collect and store. Okay. So I'm not going to read through all of those individually, but I'm going to kind of go through in broad strokes. You have 3 types of data that you need to track. One is what I'd call descriptive data. This is related to what's the name of the finding, what is the finding itself, and then what's the additional information, like what business unit does it belong to, or is there a reporting category, or what's the rating, etc. What's that related descriptive information that helps you determine what is the finding, how important is it, and also when you report on it, how you organize it. The next part are your responses. So, and included in this is your due dates. So this is important because in both your management response and remediation, you need to make sure to capture in a structured way what the response to each item is. So for your management response, you need to capture either some narrative text or some sort of document that captures the response of your credit union to the finding. And then as you move on to the remediation stage, you want to be able to capture the evidence related to the finding that proves that that finding was actually remediated. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in detail a little later on, but it's important to capture both of those types of information in a structured way so that you can go back and easily find that. And then the last kind of data that you need is related to the way that it's routed and worked around your organization. So this includes the workflow stage that we mentioned earlier. It also includes the current person in the business unit who you've assigned it to, and also what we would call an accountable manager. A simple way to describe an accountable manager is a simple way is it's the boss or bosses of the person that's assigned to. Another way to look at it is, who in your business organization has ultimate accountability to make sure that this finding is resolved. So sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's multiple people, but it's those people that are on the hook to make sure that it gets done. And then finally, you want to make sure to have a place for some unstructured notes, and you want to have an audit trail to make sure you can reverse engineer what happened, or you can go back at a later time and figure out what happened on a finding. So those are the 3 parts of structure that you want to make sure that you're following in your findings management process. So with that, let's jump to a quick case study story. Oops, let me flip back to my presentation. All right. So I'm going to tell you the story of a credit union in the Boston area. It's DCU, our digital credit union. What they were facing at the time was they had they didn't have a really large number of findings, but they were having trouble getting them cleared and knowing with confidence that findings were resolved and remediated properly. And it manifested itself by, audit after audit, that recurring things would come up again and again and again. And it was really very frustrating to them. They felt like they didn't have a good handle on what was being worked and if it was being worked properly. So what they did is they implemented the structure of the findings accountability framework that I just described. And what that gave them is that it gave them the tools and the information to be able to look at their findings backlog, and they could know with a high degree of certainty, what the story was on any given finding. So they would know what state it was in, they would know who was working it, they would know if things were being overdue or they were being worked on time. It gave them the confidence that they were managing, and it helped them keep track of all these findings in a way that led to higher accountability. Findings were cleared on schedule, and they were able to actually be confident that they were actually resolved and remediated properly. So that's a story about how DCU was able to take these techniques that we've talked about and apply them in a meaningful way. So this is all about structure. So before I move on to the next topic, I just want to have everyone share in the chat. What about this? What about the structure part of this do you think will be most impactful for your organization? So please let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear which part of this has been most valuable for you so far. All right, so great data model. Thanks, Athena, appreciate it. What else? All right, great. So sounds like to be able to, and also John, I saw the ability to capture evidence. So I'm glad that some of those things will be helpful for you. So with that, let's move on to the next side of the triangle, which is your business units. So I'm going to tell you something to start off this segment, and I hope it's not a surprise. I'm sure it's not a surprise, but your business units are probably frustrated. They want to be responsive. They want to do their part and help and pull their weight. But, the problem is they have their own issues to deal with, and they just don't have time to figure out our spreadsheets, and they can't spend time playing Where's Waldo with what needs to be done. Okay. So if they're frustrated, what do they want? What they're looking for is actually pretty simple. That, one, they want to help. They know that it's their obligation to close these things out and address them, but it needs to be easy. They need to be able to do it. They need to be able to have one place where they can go figure out what needs to be done so they can do it and then get back to their mainline job. Okay, so that sounds pretty easy. In practice, sometimes it's pretty hard to accomplish. On the flip side of that, what are you looking for? The thing that I hear most often from credit union auditors is relatively simple, is that you just want the findings resolved on time and as expected. So if these expectations that both you and the business units have seem pretty simple, like how do we get there? So how do we actually achieve that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share something with you, the next part of the framework, and it's called the business unit formula. If you want to turn to page 7 in your worksheets, there's a place for you to take notes there. So there are 3 parts to the business unit formula. The first part is what I call a mindset, all right? And when I say mindset, I mean specifically your mindset. So the problem is that there's often a gap in mindset. So the business units want to help and be responsive, but the fact of the matter is you're not at the top of their priority list. They have other fish to fry. They have other things to worry about. You just want the work to get done and for the findings to be resolved on time, which is totally understandable. And so the first step in sort of bridging this gap is for you to change your mindset. You need to be the person that bridges the gap to provide the business units what they need, whether it's tools or information, or holding their hand or whatever they need to be successful in addressing these findings that are outstanding. It would be nice if they could meet you halfway, but the fact of the matter is they usually have their hands full on 15 other different things. And, what we've seen is the biggest thing that makes a difference is for you to take the extra mile and make the extra effort to reach them. All right. So in the next 2 steps in the formula, we'll talk about specifically what that looks like. But the first step is just your mindset itself. All right. Second step are tailored to-do lists. All right. And what do I mean by that? So what I mean is that for every person that has something assigned to them, they need a list, a to-do list that's specific to them. So for example, if Bob and the branch has 2 findings assigned to them, then they should have a to-do list with their 2 items listed on it. Or if Sally in lending has 3 findings and 2 document requests assigned to her, then she should have a list with 5 items on it. Now, I know what you're probably thinking now. You're saying, Brad, that's a lot of work, okay? And depending on your tools, it may or may not take a lot of time. But I can tell you from what we've seen in other credit unions, this one thing is critical. The number one thing that I hear from business units is that I don't have time to figure out what needs to be done. Tell me what I need to do, make it easy for me, and I'll get it done. And if it's not easy, it's hard for me to get done. Now, unfortunately, to complicate it a little bit, you actually need 2 lists for everybody. You need one for things that are assigned to them. And to kind of go back to that concept I mentioned earlier about an accountable manager, you need a list of all the things that they're accountable for. So what it does is for any given person, they can say on their list, it'll say, hey, here at the top of the list, it says, here's what is assigned to me. And then at the bottom of the list, it says, here's what's assigned to my people. And then I can know and manage that. And that ends up being crucial through the process. And I'll talk about it a little bit more a little later on, but it's crucial for helping them manage that process themselves without having to have you poke and nag them all the time. So this part is crucial, having tailored to-do lists. Third and the last step of the business unit formula is one place. That means that your business unit staff, they need one place to find out what they need. If they need to work on findings, they need to go to one place. If they need to respond to document requests, they go to this one place. If they need to run reporting or whatever else they need to do, they need to go to this one place. They can't be in the process of searching around or like, hey, which one of these 15 different spreadsheets do I need to look at, and what directory is that in, or what have you. They need one authoritative place or process to be able to go through and figure out, hey, this is what needs to be done, and this is how I figure it out. All right. So with that, let's talk about another case study. So this case study I'm going to talk with you about is a credit union on the West Coast in Orange, California. They are the Credit Union of Southern California. So I started talking to these folks a while ago, and when they were a growing credit union, they first came to us and they said, hey, from an audit team perspective, I think we have this handled, but our business units are just really frustrated and are overwhelmed. As we're growing and taking on more business, we have more and more audit and compliance related activities, and it's harder for them to keep track of, and they feel like they're getting behind, and it's just super frustrating. And they've told us that something has to change. All right. So what the folks at CU SoCal did was to basically implement the business unit formula. They were able to put together, they were able to go that extra mile to reach out to their business units, gave them what they needed, put together to-do lists and resources for them that allowed their business units to easily figure out, hey, here's what I need to have done, and here's what I need to do it by. And that, none of this, just to be clear, none of it makes any of the actual steps easier on the business unit. The business unit still needs to respond, and they still need to remediate the findings. This doesn't change any of that. What it changes, though, is it makes it crystal clear for them what needs to be done and by when and how they need to do it. And so that alone makes a huge difference. And what CU SoCal found is by doing this, they dramatically were able to decrease the amount of time that their business units had to spend addressing all these items. And they thought it was fabulous. So this is all about the business units and business unit formula. So before I go on to the last side of the triangle, I'm going to ask you again in the chat, please ask you to share with me when it comes to the business unit formula and the things that we talked about, what stood out to you, or what do you think, like, hey, that might apply to us here at my credit union? So please let me know in the chat, what do you think, what stood out to you? I'll give you a couple seconds to answer.
And Brad, while everyone's answering, we did have a question come in to clarify, would we be adding doc requests for exams in addition to findings, results from audits and exams?
Well, I think it depends on, I think most of the credit unions that we've worked with do that. They would want to automate the entire process, but what we're primarily talking about today is findings. I would tell you that the process for like document request is pretty similar. It's not the same, obviously, but it does have a similar set of constraints and problems that it creates in the business units about knowing what they need to do and when and how to find it. So it's something that if it's a pain point for you, then yes, I would address it. Great. All right. So hopefully so far you've been able to take out a couple of nuggets. Now we're going to cover the last side of the triangle, and that is communication. All right. So when it comes to communication, there are a few things that would typically go sideways. The first is really that communication is all over the place. You know, a lot of your communication is over email. And what happens is everyone's individual email inbox becomes a de facto filing cabinet for information related to an audit, you know. And that is cumbersome, but it often, you know, it works fine in the moment. But when you need to find something a few weeks, a few months, or maybe even a few years later, you know, it's a mess and it typically doesn't work. Then there's what I call reporting up or also reporting out. And what I mean by this is keeping your management, your supervisory committee, and your auditors and examiners, all those folks in the know about what's happening and what has happened. And most credit unions we talk to do a fairly good job of this, but what they really struggle with is that it burns a ton of time. So the time required to make this process work effective just burns a lot of unnecessary time on their part. And then the last thing that goes wrong really with communication is surprises. So, you know, I know everyone loves a good surprise every once in a while. I mean, who doesn't like a surprise party or a birthday surprise or something? But when you're working on an audit, surprise is probably a bad word, right? And so what kinds of things am I talking about here? So imagine this, you've probably gotten emails or calls from people that, you know, or something like this that said like, hey, you know, I just forgot about that. Or, you know, I'm sorry, it fell off my priority list. Or, you know, this other really important thing came up and I just couldn't get to it. I just need another month, right? And, you know, the problem, everyone has things that come up, right? But from your perspective in running the audit program, you know, you're ultimately on the hook to make sure, you know, you're the point person to make sure all of this gets done on a timely basis. So if it's something you hear about in advance, maybe it's okay, but surprises at the last moment, the day before it's due, you know, not so good. So if we're suffering from, you know, our communication being all over the place and we're burning a bunch of time on reporting and surprises, you know, the question is, what do we want instead? All right. And what I would argue, and based on our experience, is that something like this is what you want instead. You're going to want clarity and transparency. And so what I mean by that is it should be, you know, fairly obvious and easy to find about like what's going on and what the situation is. You know, you're going to want documentation of everything. So if you've had a management response, you want to be able to easily get that. If you've had something remediated, you want to have evidence of that, right? And then lastly, and again, I've mentioned this a couple of times, that it's a recurring theme that I hear a lot, is that folks just want it done on time and as expected. So what I'm going to share with you now is the last part of the framework, and something we call the 3 communication essentials. If you'd like to take notes, you can turn to page 9 in your worksheet. So there's a place for you to take notes on it there. So there's 3 things that if you get right in your audit process, that you'll be able to get the clarity, transparency, documentation, and have it on time and as expected. So let's jump into those right now. So the first thing are business unit reminders. So, and I've already talked about this being an uncomfortable truth, but when it comes to your business units, audit is not at the top of their priority list. That doesn't make them bad people. It's just that they have other things to worry about, right? So, how do you help them if they want to be responsive, but they need help doing it? So one thing you need to do is you need to remind them, and you need to remind them constantly, and you need to remind them consistently. So we've helped a bunch of different credit unions with this, and we sort of figured out a way to handle this that's both fairly simple and also very effective. So I'm just going to share that with you now, and then you can take notes if this sounds like something that would be interesting for you. So there are 3 parts to the reminders that you need to execute on. First is you want a due today email. And what that is just what it sounds like. You want an email that goes out to everybody who has something due today, right? So, and it's just to, at the beginning of the day, say, don't forget, this is on your list, make sure it gets done, all right? Second thing is a weekly digest. So this weekly digest should be a listing of everything that's assigned to them, regardless of when it's due. I would suggest ordering it and by due date, so that the most important things float to the top and other things float to the bottom. But just having that digest is sort of that weekly tickler to say, hey, don't forget you have to do these things, or as life gets busy and they have other priorities jump up, there's like this constant sort of someone tapping them on the shoulder that says, hey, don't forget this is on your plate too, right? So that's the second part. The third part is that you should deliver these emails to both people that you've assigned work to and their accountable managers. And so let me kind of go into that a little deeper. One of the things that I've heard audit heads really struggle with before is that they really don't like to have to keep tabs on when people have things due, and they don't want to have to nag people all the time, right? So by making sure you include both the people that you're assigning work to and their accountable managers or their bosses, what you give them is you give them the ability to manage this themselves. So you give the entire organization the tools, or you give their bosses the tools to say, hey, your employees, here's what's due. So then they can take some initiative, and they on their side can make sure that these things get done, and they can reallocate work or adjust priorities, what have you, to make sure that these things are done on time or on a timely basis. All right. And by doing that, that gets done without you having to constantly poke and nag them. So that's what the key and the critical nature of business unit reminders are. So that's the first communication essential. Second one, reporting up or out. So when I talk about reporting up, I mean to management, your supervisory committee, or your board. When I say reporting out, I mean the outside auditors or examiners or the like. And as I mentioned here, where we see people struggle a lot is just on time. It's making sure that this reporting is done on a consistent basis in a way that's valuable without just taking tons of staff time or your time to generate. So the key here to solve this is that you want to find a couple of reports that work for you, and you want to create a format, a template, so to say, that works. And then you want to spend the time, and there's going to be some investment in your part here, but you make that template easy for you to execute on a fairly quick basis. And when you do that, you'll find that like on an incremental basis, you're able to generate these reports incrementally very quickly. And so it gives those people that you need to report to what they need without it causing a bunch of time hassle on your part. So I could spend 30 minutes on like the ins and outs of this part alone, and I just simply don't have the time today to spend that with you. So what I did instead is I'm giving you 2 report templates that we've used before with different credit unions that are proven to work. And I've actually, if you flip to the next couple of pages in your worksheets, like you'll see those template formats attached there. So one of them is an open findings report, and that's just what it sounds like. It's a report that you can generate that lists any findings that are open at any given time. The second is a closed findings report. Now and this also is what it sounds like, it's findings that are closed. Now typically you would use this in a time interval. So the most common time interval I've seen is quarterly. So like maybe like if as you meet with your board or prepare a board package, you prepare a report on the closed findings, the findings that were closed the previous quarter. You could also use different time periods. You could use the findings closed within a year or a month or whatever your reporting frequency is. You can modify that, but the key is that you want to be able to report on, one, what's open, and hey, what have we done and completed and knocked off the list. So again, I provided those templates for you. Feel free to use those. You can copy them directly. You can just use them as a starting point, or just use them however you would like. I'm happy to provide those to you. So that's the second communication essential. The third and last one is documentation. So let me be real specific here, because documentation can mean like 100 different things. What I'm talking about is evidence and backup of 2 specific things. So one is your credit union's response to a finding. So what is your management response? What are you doing in response to a finding? You want to be able to make sure that that is documented and obvious and crystal clear. Second is when it comes to remediation, you want to be able to have evidence of any actions that were taken to remediate it, and some sort of evidence that says, yes, this was actually remediated. So in this sense, documentation could mean, it could be management statements, it could be reports, system dumps, auditor statements. It could be, it could be many different things. The key is that it provides evidence that can be used now, or it could be used 5 years from now, about how your credit union responded and acted upon any finding. And here's the linchpin, all right? The linchpin is that you not only have to collect it, but you have to store and organize it in a way that it's accessible. And it needs to be accessible, 2 days from now, 2 months from now, or 2 years from now. And if you don't make it where it's retrievable and accessible, then, it's not really of much value. You need to be able to, in the future, you need to be able to come back and say, yes, we saw that in the past. Here's how we addressed it, and we're confident this is clear, right? So with this in mind, I have 2 questions for you. And I'm not going to ask you to answer these in the chat. I just want you to answer those. Just answer these to yourself. So first question is this. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being terrible and 10 being incredible, how consistently does your credit union collect, store, and make accessible documentation? So that's your first question. Scale of 1 to 10, how consistently do you do this? All right. So then my second question to you is, if you answered less than a 9, then why? Like, why do you tolerate that? And I don't mean to be excessively pointed in my question there, but it's crucial that you're able to document what's gone on and be able to provide that in the future in order to provide assurance and confidence to all those people that follow behind you. So I asked that question just to make sure if you're not doing that, you should ask yourself a hard why. Like, why is that? So with that, let's talk about a case study. All right. Now, I didn't realize this before I put this webinar together, but so this case study is going to be with a credit union that we've worked with. It's Del Norte, and Casey from Del Norte is actually on the call today. So just so you know, I didn't intend that, but thank you, Casey, for joining us. So their story was this. they had a situation where they were doing a lot of internal audits that were doing a lot of like monitoring and quality control operations, and these were generating a steady supply of findings that came out of this that needed to be remediated. And what they were experiencing is these findings were not being remediated on a timely basis, and they kept on backing up and backing up and backing up, and it created this big backlog. And they were frustrated about it, and their business units were frustrated about it, and they just said, like, no more. Like, we got to figure out something to do about this. So what they ended up doing is they utilized these communication essentials, and what they saw in the result is that as soon as they started to do this, their results turned around extremely quickly. So whereas before they had these backlogs of findings that kept on growing, now all their findings, about 85% of the time, they're cleared on time, and their backlog of findings remains low on a consistent basis. And again, it's not because they didn't change how they were performing their auditing. It's not like the business unit suddenly had a change of heart or anything. It's just that there needed to be clear communications and expectations between the two organizations so that the work could get done effectively. Once that was addressed, everything else started to fall in place. So before I move on to the next thing, I want to ask, like I've done before, let me know what of this in the communication, which of these do you think would be, of these communication strategies, do you think would be most valuable or that you'd be most likely to implement? So just let me know in the chat, like, which one of these do you think is most valuable? Business unit reminders and frequency. Great, hear that a lot. What else? All right, great. So documentation. So this is, so I'm glad that y'all been able to take away a couple of nuggets or two so far. So with that, there's another challenge that, I've brought up a couple of times, but we haven't really addressed, and that is time. So if you were to do all these things manually on a spreadsheet, it would probably take you an extra, I don't know, I'm just guessing, like 15 hours a week to execute all these things. And, in a normal time, that would be difficult or impossible. But with the pandemic and everything, we're already working more, and many of us are exhausted and burning out. So that's just not tenable. So what I want to ask you is, would you like to learn more about how to automate this process so that you can get all this extra accountability and at the same time not burn a lot of time and actually cut your administrative time in half? So if so, please put yes in the chat below. So, and I just want to hear, I want to make sure to wait. If y'all are interested, I want to do it. If you're not interested, I'm totally fine. I really want to deliver this valuable training and accountability, and I can teach you how to implement this fast, but only if you're interested. So looks like yes, got a couple of yeses in so far, so great. All right, glad to hear it. All right, great. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you on a very brief and short walkthrough of our product Redboard and show you how it helps you automate some of the things that we've talked about today. So I'm going to flip over real quick. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as someone who's likely in your situation is in charge of audit. All right. So you'll notice that the first page that we land on gives you all of your open audits. So in this case, for example, we have 4 audits up here, but at no matter whether if you're a smaller credit union and you have like 1 or 2 audits, or you're a big credit union and you have 10 or 15, all of your open audits are kind of open and readily accessible from the moment you come into the system. So one of the big things that we talked about up front was about the structure of your findings process. So let me show you a little bit about that. So there's this audit down here. It's called secondary markets audit. I'm going to go into that. All right. It has a findings tab right here. I'm going to go to the findings tab. And so right here, you can see that there's a couple of findings listed here. So what this gives you is a quick dashboard of what the situation is with your findings. You can see what they are. You can see what status they're in as far as what workflow status. You can tell who they're assigned to and when they're due. So at a quick view, it gives you that kind of quick snapshot of where that finding is. If you want to dig into some more detail and see the detail on something, I'll go ahead and drill down into this first one and you can see that. All right, so you can see this gives you the complete text of the finding. So I'm not going to read that to you, but the complete text of the finding is right there. And then as you go down, you can see additional information about the finding. So we can see that this finding is in remediation status. You can tell different things about when the due date is, what business units it belongs to, who it's assigned to, and what have you. Because this finding is in remediation, this finding has already gone through the management response process. So you can see that there's been a management response here that's been added. In this case, it was relatively short, so it was just a sentence. And since it's waiting for remediation for those steps to be completed, as soon as those steps are completed, the person that's assigned to can come in and add a narrative response or add a document here to do that, and then they'll be able to close out this finding. So that's just a quick view of how that structure, you can have something, what this provides for you is sort of an out-of-the-box structure for you to drop your findings in. You don't have to worry about creating any of this. It has things and operations that control like how your findings are routed and work through the process. And it allows you just to get those in and route those out quickly and get them worked. So that's a little bit about that. Now, one thing that I'm going to show you really briefly, we didn't talk about this in the main part of the webinar and the class. So I'm only going to spend about 30 seconds on these each, but I just want to kind of give you an idea in terms of structure. And I know a question came up about this earlier. The platform also gives you a structure for document request and for your internal audit operation. So quickly for document request, I'll just give you a quick look. So right here, we have a business continuity exam that we've laid out here. So if I go into here, there's a document request tab. I'll go to here. And so these are actual document requests that would come out of a NCUA business continuity exam. So everything gets loaded into the system. You notice that these are assigned out to people with due dates. So those have been all routed out to those folks in your business units for completion. And then as they're finished, they'll come back. Couple little niceties are that we keep all the numbers that came from either the NCUA or your state examiner, so that, and we provide these convenience ways for you to drop the information out of the system and send it back to them. That's something we've gotten some really positive feedback from examiners on about how we're able to keep everything linked together. So that's just a little bit about document request. I'm not going to go into any deep detail there. I just want to kind of share that quickly. And then for those of you who run any internal audit operations on your own, some folks have, you run multiple internal audits during the year. Some folks, it may only be branch audits. We have, just as an example, have a branch audit up here, this Main Street branch audit. I'll just click into that. So it has an audit program tab. We'll go to that. And I'm not going to go, again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but what I just want to show you is it has a structure just like we do for findings, except designed for an audit program in a way that you can organize your audit steps. You can organize your process into audit steps and into audit step categories. We have our own set of statuses like we do on findings for workflow that are designed to kind of guide that process from the item being worked through review and being eventually closed out. So again, that's a structure that's all built into the platform. It comes out of the box. So I just kind of wanted to show you that briefly. I won't go into any detail. If you have questions about that, you can ask them. I'll feel free to help you to answer this. So the last thing that I'm going to show you is we spent a lot of time today talking about business units. So what I've shown you so far has been completely about the audit team side of the equation. All right, so what I want to do is just shift gears and show you what it looks like from the business unit side of things. So I'm going to log out And I'm going to log back in as a guy named Mike. He's a business unit person. All right, so you notice, so we come into the system, Mike's view is different. So he has a dashboard that is tailored to exactly what he needs. This is his one place to go find stuff that's assigned to him. So in this case, we notice Mike, there's a tab here that says items assigned to me. He has 3 items. There's 1 item, 2nd item, 3rd item. One's a document request. There are 2 that are findings that are assigned to him. He can see what the due dates are. If he wants to go into one of these and deep dive so he can work it. So I'll click on this 2nd finding here. He's able to go into this finding, able to see exactly what the actual issue is, what needs to be resolved. In this case, the status is a management response, so he knows that he needs to complete a management response to this finding. And if he goes down, there's a place for him to do that. So that's just a little bit about what it looks like from their perspective. The other thing from the business unit perspective that I talked about is with people, with the bosses or the organizations above these people. So how do we give them tools that allow them to manage that themselves? So we have this other tab here that you may have seen that says items I'm accountable for. And if I click on that, that shows everything. I'm still logged in as Mike, so it shows everything that's listed as where Mike is accountable. So, there's a couple of document requests up here. There's a couple of findings here, and then there's a couple of more findings down here. So again, the purpose of this is really to give those accountable managers the tools so that they can help manage this process on their own. So once you assign this work out, you don't have to sit there and nag and pester your business units all the time. They can actually determine, hey, I know that, like in this case, I know these 2 are assigned to Ben, and I know when they're due. I need to make sure that I clear items off of his plate or manage his work so that he can actually get these done. All right. So the last thing I'll show you real quickly is just, I talked a little bit about reminder emails. I know a couple of you mentioned that that was something that you thought was valuable. Just to give you an example of the reminder emails that come out of the system. This is an example of an email reminder. All of this comes out of the box. So if you can imagine what it is if that page that I just showed you that is their own sort of one place portal, the email reminders essentially take that, they snapshot it at any given point in time, and they send it out to someone every week. So it is that, if they would rather come in the system and work it, that's fine. If they never do it and they need to have someone ping them and poke them, the reminders do that once a week also. So that's just a way that, again, the purpose here is so that we set up a way and a system and a process that allows these findings to get completed on time without you having to spend, go and nag and pester these people all the time. So once you set a due date and assign it to someone and assign who their boss is, it allows them and gives them the tools to manage that on their own. So that's what I have to show you for the quick walkthrough. I don't want to spend any more time. If you have interest, I'm happy to show you more, but I want to make sure to be cognizant of your time today. So just to wrap this up, what do you get with this? You're able to resolve findings on time. That's kind of the key thing that we started with today. The platform provides the automation for you to resolve these findings on time and easily without any hassle. It lowers the audit burden on your business unit, so it makes it easier for them to figure out what they need to do. And the experience that we've seen is it actually drastically decreases the time they spend on it as well. And it cuts your administrative time in half. All right. And I'll tell you, the last thing I'll finish up here was just a couple of stories to illustrate that. The last thing is that what we've tend to see is that it ends up paying for itself. So, and what I mean by that is between the time that you on the audit side save and the time that your business units save, what our customers have told us is that they're saving so much time that it pays for the software several times over. So it just ends up being a no-brainer. So let's talk about let me share a couple of specific credit union stories with you. So one is, and I have a couple quotes up here. I'm not going to read the quotes. Feel free to read them if you'd like. But first one is Point West. If you're one of the smaller credit unions on the line, they're $100 million. They're definitely a small credit union. What was really interesting from their perspective is, since they were small, the folks that were most involved in running their audit operation were actually, their CEO and their COO, and the people that were working it with the rest of their executive team. And so what they were able to get by using our platform to save a bunch of time is that it freed up time with the people that most needed that time. So imagine, if you're able, if you're the CEO and you're able to free up a day or 2 days out of your month that you used to be spending on some of this stuff and now able to use it on other things, that's gold. And that's kind of experience that they've had. Next story is Del Norte. I mentioned, this is a quote from Casey. Casey's actually on the line with us today. But the really thing that came out from our conversations with them is how much that their business units just love to use the platform. We tried to make it really easy for them to use. And that's the experience that they had, that they just loved being able to use it because they were able to get their work done and get their job done and go on and do what the other things they needed to pay attention to. Next story is Credit Union of Southern California. So they're right about $2 billion. The story that I love to share about CU SoCal is that, and I may have the actual days of the week wrong, but this is how the story went. On a Monday, they signed up with our trial process. On the next day, on a Tuesday, they had loaded their entire annual NCUA and state of California annual exam into the platform. And on Wednesday, they had already sent it out and their business units were starting to work on it. All right, so that's just kind of an illustrative of the advantage you can get by using a platform that does all the hard stuff for you, that you can just get a lot of the stuff done and knock it out so much quicker than you used to be able to. The last example I'll give you is DCU. For those of you on the line that are in larger credit unions, DCU is 10 billion. They just crossed the magic 10 billion threshold. What their experience really is that since they had a couple of people on their audit team, they were able to save so much time that they basically were able to get twice as much work done. And that was, they were able to move forward with their audit plans and their approach to $10 billion in a way that was so much quicker than they thought, because they're still doing all the same audit work they had, but they don't have to do any of the minutia or the micromanaging or anything else. So for them, it was just critical. So before Q&A, last thing I'll leave it with you for, if you're interested, and if you're not interested, that's fine, but if you're interested, I have a special offer for you. So if you're on this class, I'm going to offer a 60-day free, no-risk trial, and that is exactly what it sounds like. Try our platform for 60 days. We think you're going to love it, but if you don't, totally understand, and there's no risk for you. You don't have to pay us anything. All right, so it's completely no risk. In addition to that, we're going to provide for you data conversion services for up to 10 hours. And what other credit unions have used that for is really to take those old audits and examinations where they might have findings that are outstanding, and we're able to mass load those all at once, so that from day one, you're able to have all of your outstanding findings up on the platform, and you're really able to see the benefit of having everything managed in one place. So that I'm going to throw in your special offer. And then lastly, we're going to provide a 33% discount on a 3-year term. So you can also view it as buy 2 years, get one free, but we're just going to cut 33% off the price for you in exchange for you purchasing with us today. So if you'd like to do that, or at least think about it, you can schedule a demo with us at the website link there on the page. It's also on your handouts. So just a couple of conditions. You need to be a participant in this class. So if you're listening to this, you've already met that. You need to schedule a demo in the next 24 hours. So if you go to that link, it has a calendar. You can pick anywhere up to 3 weeks in the future. You can pick a time that works for you. It's pretty easy. And then you just need to start your trial process sometime in the next 2 months. So that's what I have to talk with you about. I hope I've been able to cover and leave a few nuggets for you. That's what I had to cover with you today. At this time, I'm going to open it up, Amy, for any questions that may have come in. I'm happy to address anything that you have.
Yes, everyone, please feel free if you have any questions for Brad to go ahead and type those in. And thank you again for joining us. We did have one come in that just said, does Redboard work with my audit firm?
Okay, all right, well, that's a good question. So short answer is yes. The way I would describe that is I view Redboard as having 3 constituents when people use it. The number 1 constituent is the folks that are on this call. It's, audit folks, audit team, VP of audit, VP of risk, what have you. We've talked a lot about that, so I think that's kind of obvious. The second one are business units. We've talked about that a lot today as well, but those are a key participant, and they're one of our main constituents. Our third set of constituents are those folks like I would group auditors and examiners into that group. So yes, and what we've seen is that we've gotten feedback from both auditors, outside audit firms, and examiners where they like the fact that the credit union is using our platform because it structures the process so well, and so the process that they go through is regimented, which, as auditors, everyone loves that, and things get done on time, and then also just the consistency in the process tends to really be a advantage for those outside auditors. So the feedback that we've gotten from our customers or through our customers is that their outside auditors really like the fact that their folks are on Redboard. So hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Brad. We had another question come in on, is the product license based upon the number of users? All
right, so good question. So I'll tell you a story. The answer is no, as we're licensed based on your asset size of your credit union. And the reason for that is that when we first started off, and we've had this reinforced from our customers through the years, is that when you want to add somebody, you want to add them. Like if I want to add someone from lending or my branch ops, or some folks add their outside auditors, they don't want to have to do license checking to figure out, do I have enough licenses, or I need to go through a budget process to get more licenses or anything like that. So we got rid of all that. We license you based on the asset size of your credit union. And then within that asset size, you have full access to the platform. You have unlimited users, unlimited access, put in as many audits as you want. There's, the training wheels are off. You can go after it. So, once you sign up, you have unlimited access to everything.
Awesome. We had one more come in here on, well, a few more. Another one of annual pricing, question mark. Is this annual?
Right. So so we're a SaaS product. We're a SaaS product, which means we host everything. Our pricing, if you look on all of our pricing is on our website, so you can look at that. On the website, our pricing is listed as a monthly price. We do require that there is basically a prepayment of an annual amount. So you basically pay once a year.
And then that works with the follow-up we had here of, is this server or web-based? So I think you answered that one.
Yeah, so I'll just say a little bit about that. So we have, this is web-based. You notice that this webinar is in conjunction with ongoing operations. Ongoing operations is actually our infrastructure for Redboard. And for those of you know, or for those of you who don't know, so OGO has, and Amy, I might get these numbers wrong, but you have about 150 plus credit union customers. You do business continuity, disaster recovery, and then a lot of core hosting as well. So their infrastructure has already been, looked up 9 ways to Sunday by the NCUA and regulators all the time, and we ride on top of what they've already done.
Awesome. So that is all the questions we have for now. Does anyone have any last minute ones they want to put in the chat before we end our session? And I think if not, of course, if you come up with any later, yep, I was going to say you've got I'm sure Brad's email address is readily accessible.
Yeah. So one thing that I'll just show you real quick, because I get this question a lot, is so I have a link up there. Is that if I want to do a demo, how do I sign up? Let me just show you that real quick, and then we can wrap up here. So if you want to sign up for a demo, like I said, just come to our website. It's just redboard.com. If I could type, that would help. All right. If you go to our website, there's this big red button on the right. Can't miss it. It says request a demo. If you click on that, you just give us a few pieces of information, your name, your email address, credit union, etc. Hit schedule my demo. Once you do that, you'll come to a calendar picker. You can pick any day. I think we have it set up to 3 weeks in advance. So you can just pick a day. So let's say I'll just pick Monday, and then you have a choice of times on every day. Pick that time, hit confirm. Make sure we have everything right here, and then just click schedule, and then we'll send you the invites and everything. You don't have to do anything, and then we'll just talk to you at that time. So again, if you want to do that, then that you can go and pick your own time, whatever works for you.
We also had one last question here, Brad. Just will you be providing the folks on the call with the deck that you presented today?
If I can, I'd say that the worksheets are the main output, but if you're interested, in the deck, just let me know and I'm happy to send it to you. It's mainly pictures, but if you'd like those, I'm happy to send those to you. It's kind of large, so I may have to Dropbox it to you or something, but I'm happy to share that if you'd like. So if you'd like that, just send me an email and I'll get back in touch with you and get it to you.
All right, and I think you guys have Brad's email, but I will go ahead and put it in the chat as well now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on there. It's bpowell@redboard.com.
And I think with that, Brad, we've come to the conclusion of our questions. If you want to wrap us up.
All right, great. So again, thank you for taking the time to sit with us today and talk about the Findings Accountability Framework. I hope that you were able to take away 1 or 2 nuggets. And again, if there's any way I can help in the future, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. And with that, we will close it down for today. I hope you have a good day and a good rest of the week. Take care.
Thank you all.